All right, Chief Sargent, thank you for joining us.
My honor, my pleasure. Thank you.
So, quick conversation today. Wanted to bring you in and basically just talk about your book. And as we discussed earlier, we're going to have a promotional process coming up where we're using your book, and wanted to get a face with the name and allow you to kind of outline some of your concepts and how we can apply those into the real world.
Okay.
So, Chief, if you don't mind, introduce yourself for those who might not know you.
So, I used to be high speed, low drag, and now, as my indigenous friends say, I'm sharp like rock, fast like tree. Um, so I started out in the volunteer fire service, volunteer EMS service, and then in 1979, after graduating college, was hired by the city of Virginia Beach firefighter. Started out as a firefighter paramedic, and sort of thrived in that environment. Promoted my way up to division chief. Spent times on the engines and trucks in some very busy houses. Was sort of I was sort of I won't say victim. I was a sort of molded like a lot of people were in those days. We didn't have a lot of officer training, but they'd spend 28 weeks with you in the fire academy and put you on a year probation. But when you got promoted, they shook your hand, put a badge on you, and sent you out and expected you to be successful. That's not a very good way to do a business. But I was fortunate. I spent a lot of time in admin. One of the best jobs I ever had in the department was I was a captain in training. I was a rescue services coordinator. I was blessed to work for an excellent leader, a guy named Harry Dizell, who was my fire chief. I formed the Special Operations Division and started that, which encompasses all of our heavy squads, our hazmat, our maritime, our aviation units, our tactical medics. Was fortunate enough and I say me, but you got to realize I was smart enough to surround myself with people that were a lot smarter than me. So it wasn't just me, it was dozens and dozens and dozens of people that I recruited to get this done. We were fortunate enough to become one of the first female USAR task forces. I was a task force leader, but I spent most of my time on what's called the incident support team. So I was a night operations officer at Oklahoma City. Ray Downey, rest his soul, was the day operations officer. I was at the World Trade Center as the night operations branch chief for 2 months, and most of the national security events. Was fortunate enough to get recruited by the FBI at the same time. Spent 23 years as the chief tactical medic and then the assistant medical director for the Norfolk field office, FBI SWAT, where I had 5 medics and a medical director, and we deployed and operated with them. Did a ton of teaching. And when I retired, got recruited by Diplomatic Security, went to work for them on an explosive incident countermeasures team as a special operations medic for about 2.5 years. And then when I was in Africa, I got recruited by another agency and went to work for them in Afghanistan and Iraq for about 4 years on high threat protection. Was wounded in 2010, came back, went to PA school, and graduated PA school, went to a fellowship, and now I work full-time emergency medicine. I still do some security work and protective details with a specific company, and I still do the buddy the boss stuff, and looking forward to retirement in about 2 years, I hope.
Very cool. Which retirement will this be? How many times have you
retired?
Oh,
dear God, I always said that I was always like most firefighters. I always loved to work, but I'm at a point now, I got my first Social Security check this month. Woohoo. And so I'm ready to do what I want to do when I want to do it, or things that they pay me very well to do. But I don't want to do stuff that's on somebody else's schedule anymore. Who knows?
I understand that. And I think you've earned that right from everything you've said, for sure. So want to just a couple of questions. First of all, really interesting book, but I wanted to ask you, how do you, as somebody who's just approaching the book for the first time, how do you recommend that we read your book? Do you recommend that we read it like a novel all the way through? Do you want us to use it more like a textbook or like a guide where we're just going and pulling out skills and tasks?
Here's the thing. I recommend reading it as a novel, and here's my rationale behind that. Generically, the fire service and the issues that we deal with are the same. However, every organization, as you know, and the folks that are promoting know, is unique. You have your own culture, you have your own specific issues. Like I can guarantee you, on your promotional test, you're going to have an in basket that's specific to you. And on the in basket, it's going to be some sexual harassment thing or discrimination or racial thing that's going on. And you're going to have to balance that. And every organization is different. If you work in the Washington, D.C. Fire Department, or you work in, Washington Township, or you work in Virginia Beach, or you work out in California, there's different issues that are going on. But be in the right place at the right time in the right uniform and do the right thing are all the same. So I recommend reading it as a novel and just sort of looking at it and then trying to equate what is relevant to your organization. And most of it that I've discovered is relevant to most organizations, but I recommend reading it as a novel and then going back and then say, gosh, this is where I need to focus. I need to go back and look at this, or I need to go back and look at that, because, the reality is we get pretty good at fire and rescue operations, but the things that will ruin our career are usually human resources issues, and we spend 90% of our time dealing with people and dealing with problems and planning. And those are the things that'll trip you up. Of course, Fireground will too, and rescue services and EMS will trip you up if you're not, up and continually training. But so I recommend reading it as a novel and then going back and picking through it as you feel necessary.
Very good. I appreciate that. And then is there, I want to jump into some of the content you had there. One of the things that I really liked was your focus on the business of the job, right? The business of the business, I think you call it. And you said there's a change of priorities when you become promoted. Can you explain that and kind of add how that role changes?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a personal thing and an organizational thing. We've all had micromanagers, people who get promoted and are uncomfortable with where they are, and they try to fall back and do our job for us. So you have to realize that if you look at the structure of an organization, you have frontline members, which represent the bulk of our members, the people, whether it's training or emergency services or prevention or investigations or education or admin, whatever it is. But the vast majority of our people reside in the operations side. The doors go up, the trucks go out. We go take care of, as Bruno would say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That goes for your prevention people and everybody else. Then you have the next layer, which is your mid-managers, usually your battalion chiefs. And they supervise multiple companies. And then when you get to senior staff, you've got a different political outlook and you've got a different thing. So the frontline troops should spend about 80% of their time. We do three things. We operate the system, we implement change, okay, and we develop the future. Those are the three things. And so most of the operational side of the house is out there taking care of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But if you look at it, even though a small percent of their time is done about creating the future and or implementing change, what they have to offer is exponentially important, because if stuff's going wrong, if something isn't working, whether it be kit or response or protocols or people, if something isn't working, the first people that are going to know about it are the people that are frontline. If you want to know if a rifle's working, talk to the grunt that's in the hole pulling the trigger. If it ain't working, they're going to tell you, not the guy sitting in DC doing weapons procurement that's got 5 stars on his chest. So we have to listen to our frontline people, but we operate the system at that level. When you move to the battalion level, you still operate the system, but you don't go on everything that everybody else does. You can, you own your battalion, so you can go on anything you want. The question is, do you have the time and should you be going? So your job really at that point is to operate the system from a command standpoint, but then your job is to implement change, to collect all the information that your companies are giving you and take it up the chain and push to implement the ideas that people are saying are working really well or aren't working. The other thing that battalion's responsible for is they're supposed to be a little wiser, a little smarter, and they should be able to tell those companies or those company officers, hey, that's the wrong position to take. That's not worth fighting for. That's a loser. We need to take that off the plate, and here's why. And then, of course, they spend time implementing change because they're on committees, they're helping with strategic planning and stuff like that. When you get to the fire chief, division chief, deputy chief level, the vast majority of your time is spent implementing change. How do we develop a strategic plan? What are we going to do in 2, 5, 10 years? What's the, if you have a board that you work for, how am I going to get with the board and work good with the board? Or how am I going to work with the mayor and the city manager? How am I going to do that? And the council. So they spend most of their time doing admin stuff. Now when the world's burning down, should the fire chief come? Absolutely. It's his career dissipation light if something goes wrong. So you have to realize where your time is going to be spent, and you have to make a wise decision. When you promote, is that what I want to do? Do I want to sit in the jump seat and be a firefighter and be in the right place, right time? Or do I want to become a lieutenant, and do I want to supervise people and deal with the things that come with supervising people? And then do I want to be a battalion and go to the next level? So you have to realize that's a personal choice too, but you shouldn't be surprised when your job requirements change.
Yeah, I like that. And I've always found that's interesting because everybody always says, well, that person changed. Well, and then you kind of bring it up that you're supposed to. That's a natural, ebb and flow of this scenario. One of the things you talked about strategic planning and actually how that changes things. And I believe in some of your other content, whether it be your book or your online video, you talk about strategic planning. Can you bring that down to the company level for me? How to break that down as a frontline company officer and how to actually do that for your crews?
Yeah, the company officer has a really tough job at that because you cannot walk in, because firefighters just basically don't care. That you can't walk in with a strategic plan, that's 40 pages and go, today we are going to lead with a strategic plan. It's going to fall on deaf ears. What has to happen is that company officer has to be able to clandestinely convert these very complex ideas of a strategic plan and convert them into everyday tasks, so that at the end of the day, what your company has done or what your prevention division has done is they've done things that are in that strategic plan that push that organization forward. And they've lived your values, and they've lived your core values. If your core value is, make people feel safe anywhere, any place, anytime, which is what Virginia Beach's was. How do you do that? Those are just words, and when we talk about it in the class, we talk about the government structure. We talk about how that stuff gets pushed downhill and finally gets meat on it, because politicians, they don't put meat on it. They don't even know what they want. All they say is, I want a great fire service. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's why they hire a fire chief to figure that out. And then that's what a strategic plan does. It says, what does this look like? And then you, the lieutenant, and the firefighters and inspections, you're tasked with going out there and implementing that. So it's a complex task. They have to know what the strategic plan says, but they have to also understand how to implement everyday tasks that push the organization forward and actually check little boxes without telling anybody. You don't need to tell them that what you're doing, but that's what you have to do. And it's complicated, because you're taking big, complex organizational thoughts and boiling them down to, the trucks go out, or we're doing training, or we're cleaning the truck, or we're washing toilets, or, we're pre-planning. All that stuff is in your strategic plan, and all the stuff that has to be done. And whether, even in your life, you have a strategic plan. When you want to clean your house, when you want to do laundry, what you want your mortgage to look like, how much you can afford for a car. And you do things clandestinely for your family to sort of drive you that way. We could spend hours talking about that, but that's basically, it's complex. And when you're a company officer, you got to be able to do that. You have to be able to think big and lead small.
I like that. Think big and lead small. So the people who are going to watch this are people seeking promotion, typically with our department. Walk us through that first transition, that first day where you're coming in as a brand new company officer. So we will have the opportunity, just a little background on us. Our background is, once you get placed on a promotional list, you start riding what we call the out of class seat. So you're basically riding as an officer when they're on vacation. You're the substitute teacher.
Nice.
And it is a good learning opportunity. It really exponentially increases that growth curve. But it changes on that first day that you get your bugles, so I'm told. How do you see that happening, and what is your advice for somebody going through that transition?
So I think the biggest thing is, and it's that, you're not everybody's buddy anymore. You're not, it's a unique position because you're sort of a working foreman or forewoman, You're wearing a white shirt, but in a lot of instances, you're doing the same thing that the people with blue shirts are doing. So I think the most important thing, if I was to say one thing that you got to do, the day you show up at that firehouse or that prevention division or training, and you've been put in charge of a crew, you got to sit them down and you got to lay out your expectations. These are my expectations. This is what I expect from you. This is what I expect from myself. Then you got to listen to them and say, what are your expectations? Because if those things are here, you're okay. But if they're like this, there's an issue that needs to be fixed. And, my wife taught me, and it's worked out real good. There's a saying, no expectation without negotiation. And that's true in organizations and true in your life. So that's the first thing. The next thing you have to understand is I hate to say it, but we all have people. Well, Alan Brunacini once said, one of my favorite sayings, if you follow ugly kids home, you're going to find ugly parents. Well, what we're trying to do when we create officers is not make ugly parents, so we don't develop ugly kids. But there are some ugly parents in your organization and in my organization as well. So when you get there, you're going to be judged by the past company officer's actions. So if they were a good company officer and did their duty and did everything, then it's going to be a lot easier transition than if you had a lazy wipe down, sweep down, sit down officer who didn't really want to do anything. And that crew migrated there because they like that kind of environment. And now you come in and go, hey, Dickie, he don't work here no more. So we ain't doing that no more. And that's why you got to set the expectations. You're going to get judged. And again, there's some examples in the book, and there's some funny stuff because I got my butt handed to me about the first 2 months, because I thought everybody, I thought the gold was going to do it, and they just don't.
So do you believe that it is better to come in and, drop the hand grenade of expectations there and implement those changes, or implement them slowly over time?
I think that you implement stuff slowly over time. I think it really depends on what the issue is. I'll give you an example. I showed up, I got promoted from a very busy house. I was made a lieutenant. I went to a very slow house, 4-person company. And unfortunately, I came in behind an officer who really didn't do their duty. So the second night I'm sitting there, and this was when we changed at 6 at night till 6 in the morning. I came in about 7 o'clock. I was looking around and one of my guys was gone. And I'm like, I looked at my master firefighter and I said, hey, where's so-and-so? And he goes, oh, he's at his house watching TV. I said, what? He lived right in the neighborhood, like 5 houses from the fire station. He goes, oh yeah, Dickie, the previous lieutenant, he used to let him do that. Now that's something you got to fix right now. That ain't short term. So of course I put my radio on. I walk down there and bang on the door. I say, hey, get your ass out of here. Get back to the fire station. If you ever do this again, you're going to be signing a piece of paper. Now you can think I'm a son of a bitch, but that's the way it is. That's the kind of stuff you got to fix like now. You can't let that wildfire burn. Some of the other stuff, you can ease into it, but remember, you have organizational responsibilities and priorities. And if those aren't being made, you may have to push a little bit harder, and the bottom line is if somebody's not pissed off, you're not pushing hard enough.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. You said something I want to come back to. No expectations without negotiation. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. When you go in and you say, these are my expectations as an officer, these are my expectations of you, these are my expectations around the station for training. This is how I want to delineate. You may say, okay, every month, one of the guys on the crew is going to be responsible for setting up training. Every month, somebody on the crew is going to be responsible for setting up the prevention schedule. Will help, but what you're doing is remember, you got to raise the kids. You got to build the kids. You got to teach them your job so that when they get ready to promote, they understand that they shouldn't be in the black on how to do this kind of stuff. Doesn't mean that you dump it on them. It means you supervise them and give them the opportunity to learn. So I think that when you have people who give you pushback, and there is always going to be pushback, that you have to be able to first sit down and negotiate. Say, okay, tell me your side of the story. Let me listen to what you have to say. And maybe, even the people that we have in our organization that we go, oh, Jesus, Chase again. Oh my God. How can the guy be so miserable? How can he bitch so much? Sometimes great messages come with a bad delivery. And so I think when you reach that impasse, you have to negotiate, but You have to negotiate within parameters. I mean, if somebody comes to you and goes, hey, Dickie, he never made us get out of bed at 7 o'clock. He let us sleep till 10. Well, that's non-negotiable. Okay. We didn't do hose testing, non-negotiable. We didn't do training, non-negotiable. When we do training, how we do training, what's important, what's our focus, where do we need to spend our time, that's negotiable. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think it was in one of your videos you said, we don't start raising kids at 18.
If you have kids, what would happen in your personal life if you started raising if the first time you sat kids down and taught them about values and ethics and who they shouldn't do and what they shouldn't do and taught them, what would happen if you started raising them at 18? Well, you know what? It would be a disaster. Okay. And again, if you're an ugly parent, you're going to raise ugly kids unless they're smart enough to get out from under that. So you got to start raising kids from day one, because like you said, you're getting ready to have a big turnover. And, the kids that you're going to raise that are coming in, even if they've been on the job 10, 12 years, you can still raise them. They're your next future, because when you lose 40 people, who's going to fill that? And what ethics have been instilled? What work values have been instilled in them? Do they understand the organization? Do they understand the strategic plan? So you got to raise kids early. You can't drive down the road with a cigarette in one hand and a whiskey in the other hand and turn around and look at the kids in the back seat and go, don't ever drink and drive and don't smoke. People don't pay attention to what you say, but they watch every single thing you do.
Sure. So kind of balance on that. You talk about raising them early, and I really like that, because in our organization, you only have to have 5 years of experience before you can start looking at the officer process.
Same in ours.
Yep. And so how do you balance the preparing them for that transition while also getting them to become a proficient firefighter in their first few years? And I think that comes with technical competency and leadership.
Yeah. I mean, be a talent scout, first of all. The problem is a lot of people try to stuff in, the whole problem with all of you people in the Washington Township Fire Department is you aren't more like me. Well, guess what? If you were more like me, we'd all be in jail, or we'd all be beating each other. So you got to realize that. And when we do the program, the 3-day program, we use what's called a DISC. It's a personality profile. We all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. If you're smart, not everybody's a shortstop. Not everybody's a pitcher. But a pitcher can't win the game alone. You got to figure out, you got to be a talent scout. Where do people fit? Who's my computer guru in the station? Who's got a real knack for training and setting up good training evolutions? Who can take our PT, in-station PT to the next level? Who can bring us in to the next level? So you got to be a talent scout. And if you give people the opportunity to do what jazzes them, they're going to be really good at it. So that's the first thing. Be a talent scout and find out who can do what in your organization. Who's good for shortstop, who's the pitcher, who's the catcher. And then you've got to take the time when you raise the kids to give them the opportunity to fail. You can't, if I know that you're going to hammer me every time I fail on some little thing, why am I going to go out of my way to try to do things? It is the nature of the beast that when we do our very best, sometimes we fail. And as long as it's not, as long as it's not a DUI or, we're going 100 miles an hour, ran over the top of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, those things are learning events. And you need to use them as learning events. And you raise the kids just like you do when you raise your kids. You don't beat them for everything that goes on. You go, hey, you screwed that up. Let me tell you what I expect from you. And here's what I want you to do next time. And let's keep an eye on it. And so I think you really need to be able to talent scout. You need to give people the opportunity to grow, but you also need to use your expectations. And remember, every time you go to a fire, every time you go to an EMS event, every time you do a training event or a pre-plan, those folks are learning and they're raising themselves up, especially if they've got guidance and somebody's going, hey, this is the right way to do it. This is the wrong way to do it. And here's why it's important. Don't just tell people go and do it because I said so. Give them a reason why we're doing this. Don't do stupid shit just to do stupid shit.
I like that. One of the things that I really like is your opportunity to fail. because often we forget that in the gym we do 1 rep maxes, and we're actually seeking failure to find that growth. But I feel like we don't always transfer that to the fire ground. We always look at failure as incompetency or something else, when actually it's an opportunity for somebody to learn.
And failure might not even, sometimes it's failure, but I think a lot of times it's, did we do it as well and as efficient and as timely as we could? Maybe failure isn't the right word. I mean, if every time you come back from an operation, I don't care if it's a dumpster fire, if you don't sit and go, is there anything we could have done better? Yeah, maybe when we spotted that hydrant, we could have been 6 inches back and taken the kink out of that soft sleeve, and we had gotten 200 more gallons, So if you're not using every moment that you have in emergency response and in training, planning as a learning event to make an opportunity to do things better, you do small things well, you're going to do big things well. So I think failure, sometimes it's failure, but most of the time it's how could we have done that better? And are we resulting? There's a great book called by Annie Dukes, who's a professional poker player that I love, that I use in my decision-making courses. And what she says is what you don't want to do is result. You don't want to look at the result of an event and go and change your whole process when maybe you did every single thing right and it just didn't work out. Maybe you had the data, maybe you had the stats, maybe you did everything right, it just didn't work out. You got to look at that too and be careful of resulting, what they call resulting.
I wonder if that applies, and get your opinion on, does that apply in the other direction? If the result was good, but everything didn't go well?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes luck is better than skill. It's like panic. Panic can save your life, but you got to follow 2 rules. You got to be the first one to panic, and you got to take off in the right direction. Panic is not good. And hypercool is very good. When everybody has their first time ever, everybody is going to have their first roaring structure fire with somebody trapped. When that happens, you got to act like you've been there 1,000 times. You don't dance in the end zone. It's like you don't see a surgeon coming out and spiking their scalpel, or a firefighter coming out and spiking their helmet in the front yard. You got to act like you've been there. So, when you go to the hospital and you look at your provider, whether it's a PA or doc, you go, you ever done this before? And they go, oh, countless times. You're screwed because they've never done it before.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It does work in reverse as well.
I'm actually writing down the panic as the first one to go and in the right direction. That's pretty funny.
And like I say, we've all been lucky. We've all gone, God dang, man, I moved away from that wall right in the right time. I should have seen that, and that's a lesson. That's a learning lesson as well. Absolutely.
Can you jump on real quick and talk about I forget how you said it. It was your duty as a fireman, but remembering people don't quit organizations, they quit people, and keeping the humanity in your leadership.
Look, the fire service is a people game. Win people win the game, lose people lose the game. It's all about people. You live with people, you eat with people, you put their lives on the line for people, you die with people, you live with people. And you're going out taking care of people. If you don't like people, you probably shouldn't be in this job, When it comes to organizations, people don't quit organizations. People quit people. I leave my company because I think that the people I work for are asses, or I don't like my company officer, or I decide I'm leaving this fire service for another fire service because my chief's a jerk and I can't work for him anymore, So people, the Washington Township Fire Department, there ain't no better job. I mean, Virginia Beach Fire, when I was a young kid and I went to a police graduation, I saw them give them a vest, a gun, a billy. I said, God, that's cool, man. That's what I want to do. And I went to fire graduation. They gave me turnout gear, bunker pants, a pillow, and a blanket. And I said, I'm in. That's me right there, And so you've got to realize that. Keep humanity in your leadership. Give people a second chance. Now, there's things that you are out of your control that you can't give people a second chance. When I grew up in the fire service, look, if you got a DUI, the cop would, in the early days, they'd put you in the car and take you home. Oh, you're a firefighter? Yeah, well, I'm going to take you home. Now, you're done. You get a DUI, you're done. There's some great examples, but we don't have time of. Do you have to be done when that happens? Well, you treat everybody the same, but not everybody equally. If Chase Sargent's a problem all the time, and I got 6 reprimands in my jacket, and Bobby's only got 1, and we do the same thing, you're going to treat Chase different than you treat Bobby because of history and because of what's been done. So, you gotta think about using moments of learning. When you have a failure, you have something could be done better. When you have a human resources issue, when somebody screws up, because we're all human beings, you got to be able to use that as a moment of learning. Everything you do has to be. Harry Dizell said, the fire service ain't a green shade affair. The green shades that the accountants wear. You got a debit and a credit. Not everything requires you to hit it with a baseball bat or a hammer.
I like that. So talk to me about how HR problems have changed since when you were starting to today. What are you seeing? What are you hearing when you're out in the field?
Well, the first thing is social media is the devil. You can go on some of these sites and you can look at what people are posting. If you don't think that people can see it or read it, you've lost your mind. So first of all, you got to be very careful about, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but you got to realize when you step into that fire station, you're living the Washington Township values, not your values. And whatever your values are outside of that, you don't bring them into the fire station unless they align perfectly. Let's be honest, man. What was done in the past for hazing or for, quote, joking would get you fired today. You can't show up at a firefighter's bed, a black firefighter's bed, with a white sheet over your head. But it used to be. You used to be able to do it. We've all known it. There's sexual harassment. Look, my wife's a retired Montgomery County firefighter. She was caught in a collapse, broke her neck. She was a good firefighter and a good tech rescue. So women are different than men. Vive la différence. But the old bumper sticker, don't send a woman to do a man's job, man. It doesn't apply anymore, and it shouldn't have applied then. I can tell you when she first applied for her first fire service job, the chief of the department said, when your suspenders lay flat on your chest and you can piss your name in the snow, I'll hire you. Now there were no lack of volunteers to teach her how to piss her name in the snow, but you can't allow racial discrimination. You can't allow sexual harassment. You can't allow violence in the workplace. And what I'm talking about, you can't let firefighters stand in the bay and yell at each other about something over at turnover. It's a non-starter. That's non-negotiable. The expectation has to stop right there. And so there are certain things that will ruin your career in 5 seconds or less if you don't get a handle on them. But we don't teach our people about them. That's just Chase. That's just Ryan. That's just the way they are. No, I don't care if that's the way they are. It ain't happening in the fire station. It ain't happening when you're working for Washington Township or City of Virginia Beach. Don't happen.
So how do you, I like what you said there. You've said a term a couple of times throughout this day, non-starter. How does a person, as they're young and coming up, how do they start recognizing non-starters? Whether it's actions that need immediately corrected or something that's going on a fireground, how do they identify those?
Well, I think the first thing is when you get them in kindergarten, in first grade, when you got them in the fire academy, you set out the expectations and you go, look, we don't do this. Our values are this. We don't allow this. We don't allow this. We don't allow this. This and this and this are going to get you into real trouble. And, we may come to you if you are involved in this and this and this and say, how long have you worked for us, not counting tomorrow? Okay. So that starts. I think at the company level, it's important to do those HR drills. It's important to sit your folks down and go, look, as boring as it is, today we're going to talk about our violence in the workplace policy and what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable and what we're going to do to protect ourselves. Okay. And I'm not talking about, although it happens, I'm not talking about somebody that walks in with a gun and tries to kill everybody in a fire station. I'm talking about firefighters pushing and shoving each other, over something that's going on in the bay, because I didn't clean the breathing apparatus the right way or something like that. Yeah. You have to, those critical policies, what I call red policies, are as important as the instant command policy. And I think you got to train them and you got to refresh them and you got to remind them. And the minute something like that happens in your fire station, you got to stop it instantly and resolve it and document it. And, that's, of course, a whole nother thing. And, it's boring as hell, but it's critical because, one, it's wrong. Two, it's against federal law in a lot of instances. And three, it's going to ruin your career. You can't let that happen.
You said something there, red policies, and then you expand on it in your videos and in the book. Can you talk about that now and how you color code your policies?
Yeah, I think, the first thing is, if you have 5 policy books that nobody ever looks at, you probably got too many policies to begin with. So the first thing you got to do is look at what's rational and what you need. So red policies are ones, in my opinion, that have to be reviewed every year. They're like instant command, RIT, fire ground attack, EMS, human resources, violence in the workplace, because OSHA policies. Those are the kinds of things that need to be reviewed every year. And if they're good, they're good. Because when I do expert witnessing, I can tell you, one of the first things I ask for on top of everything is let me see your policies. And if you come to me with an instant command policy that was written 10 years ago, that's got somebody's name on it who ain't even the fire chief anymore, and you tell me in court, that's not really the way we do business, my question to you is going to be, okay, so show me the way. Well, we don't really have a new policy, but that's not. Well, yes, you do. This is how you're doing business, because here's the signature, here's the date, here's your policy. Unless you can show me something more modern, this is the way you're doing business. So red policies are ones that have to be reviewed yearly. Yellow policies are ones that have to be reviewed probably every 3 to 5 years, and green policies are, flexible. And then, stuff happens. We used to send stuff out on pink paper. When we had an instant change on a policy, some political thing happened, or, we decided we were going to throw the wet blanket over the whole organization, because Chase backed the truck into a hydrant, and instead of punishing Chase, we come out and we go, everybody will not do this anymore because Chase has done it. And the minute we do that, we know that that's the Chase sergeant. Everybody in the organization knows that's a Chase sergeant. You won't back the truck without a backer policy. Everybody knows that. So when we talk about how we make policy, what's good and what's bad on making policy, but you got to have a review, and it's good to have a SOP review committee, and you got to keep them up to date. And you organizationally have to decide what you think is important and needs to be in the red and the yellow and the green, so that you make sure you get those things reviewed, and you're legally and liably, from a liability standpoint, you're covered, and that your organization knows what their expectations are. Because what's a policy do? Policy lays out an expectation. Do this, and you get whipped. Do this, you get ice cream cone.
I like that. And just as you were talking, my head was associating that with skills as well. So when you're training your men and women, what are your red skills? What are your yellow skills? And what are your green skills? So, obviously pulling a hose load is a red skill. It's a foundation of what we do. Everybody should be able to do that. And then training based off of that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, why did we have to take smart organizations? Why did we have to make the decision for firefighters? Why do we have to write a policy that tells them when they're going to call a mayday? I mean, Paul Combs, if you read his books, man, he says it all in one cartoon. What a genius that guy is. But it used to be, we left it, a smart organization is not going to leave, like a fighter pilot. You're not going to tell him when he can eject, and if this, eject, if this, eject, if this, eject. Same with mayday. If this, mayday, if this, mayday. No, you don't get to make the choice. I think I can get myself out of this. Give me 5 more minutes. No, you don't get that. You don't get that opportunity. If this, you will call a writ. It's better for me to rag you around the table and have you alive than be burying you because you took 5 more minutes.
Yeah, that's good. Talk to me about affecting change. So the lieutenants who are looking at captain, they're currently reading a book called Turn Your Ship Around, I think it is. Talk to me about affecting change in the fire service, things you've seen and done, and then the challenges that come along with that.
Yeah, I think that's written by the same guy who wrote Get Your Ship Together. Is it written by a lieutenant commander or commander in the Navy?
Yes, sir. I believe
it
is.
Yeah. And I've read those books. They're very good. There's short-term change, there's medium change, there's long-term change. Long-term cultural change, it takes a while, okay? Short-term change, the best thing you can do as a company officer is you can affect change in your own little world, which is your 4 or 5 people that are working your shift. Or, if you're a captain, you're 10 people that are in that house. Like you say, sometimes it takes a little bit of massaging and prodding, and there are things that you can have time to make change, and there's other things that you really don't have time to make. You don't have the luxury of having a time that you got to do it very quickly. That's not very often because we're pretty good about our cultures for the most part. But, implementing change, the first thing I'll tell you is, we always have this triangle that says, here's the people operating system and here's the golden palace, and information flows down. Staff grows, information flows, and nobody knows. What we need to do is invert that pyramid. We need to start listening to the people at the bottom of the pyramid, because they're the ones seeing the customer every single day. And if something ain't going right, we need to listen to them. And that's uncomfortable for people with a lot of gold sometimes, because they're like, "Oh, I didn't get this position to listen to some firefighter." Well, guess what? Remember the day you were a firefighter. Remember the things that were working and not working. Colin Powell said it best: frontline troops are always right until proven otherwise. And so implementing change requires us to implement a change in ourselves about how we listen, about how we hear, and about how we put our egos to the side and say, maybe those folks are right. Maybe that hose lay isn't working the way I thought it was. Maybe it is okay for me not to have certain standard hose lays because or Matty Dales or high rise packs, because this company has a ton of high rises and this company has none. So implementing change is tough. And again, we spend at least an hour on it, but it's sometimes you got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and sometimes you need to walk up and slay the elephant and gut it.
Yeah, I like that. How about, so if you can expand a little bit on your training and how you affect change through training. How do you prioritize? You talked about strategic planning on that. How do you prioritize that for a new company officer?
Well, I think if you cut all my money and you said, what 3 things could you do? You only got money to do 3 things. My top 3 things would be response, training, and physical fitness. Those would be my top 3 things. Training drives everything we do. Crummy training begets crummy outcomes. Okay. And so I think company officers need to, first of all, they need to know their area and know their people, because everybody has different hazards, responses, demographics. So you have to filter that in. Then you got to train like you fight like you train. Get off the couch, stop looking at videos, and don't listen to people going, but it's raining out and we're going to get wet if we go train. Well, guess what? You fight fire in the rain. Now, I'm not saying when it's lightning and there's 50-mile-an-hour winds and it's blowing sideways, but it's cold outside. We could get cold if we go train. Look, fight like you train like you fight. Get out and do the training. If you have to put a company out of service so they can pull lines or do some RIT training for a little bit, do it. Multi-company drills. 5 minutes before the party ain't the time to learn the dance. All right. The other thing I think from a training perspective is, if 20 years ago I'd have sat you down with a company officer, go, all right, we're going to do a tabletop exercise a day, and here's the exercise. 4 planes are hijacked, 2 fly into the World Trade Center, 1 flies in the Pentagon, 1 crashes in a field. 3,000 people are killed, 350 firefighters are killed, all because of terrorism. You know what you'd have told me? You lost your mind. Give me something realistic. So you've got to be talking about the unrealistic scenarios that you might encounter. And those are hazard specific. If you've got an airport or a military, you've got to say, what happens when that 727 that's coming in crashes into this apartment complex? Because if you talk about it and you prepare yourself, you're less psychologically shocked when it happens. So among all the other training that you do, you've got to take a little time here and a little time there to play Disney World and say, what if? And say, what happens if this happens?
I like that. How do you balance that? So everybody these days is asked to do more with less, right? And I think that's a common thing, both in business and the fire service. How do you balance that training when you are already tasked? How do you pull people aside? Do you use the quick drills? Do you use on runs, or do you actually set up those large multi-company drills?
So whoever termed the phrase "do more with less" was an idiot, because you can never do more with less. You can only do less with less. I don't care how if you get $10 in a budget and I cut you for $5, you can only do $5 worth of stuff. So, anybody who comes to me and says do more with less is an idiot. Things have got to come off the plate. I think there's layers of training. First, company training, at least an hour a day, specific to that company. Also, that company training should be incorporated. At least 40% of it should be generic training. I mean, I want everybody to throw ladders the same way. So today we're going to do ladders, and company 2's doing the same, not on the same day necessarily, but they're going to do a drill on how we want ladders thrown over this course of time, so that when we're throwing ladders and our crews are mixed, we're all on the same wavelength. Company specific drills, whatever is important. What are your weaknesses in your company? What do you need to beef up on? Then I think multi-company drills, when you can get them together, and if you have to break away for those pesky old fire calls and disrupt your training, then so be it. And then I think you need in-service training, where you bring everybody down to your training center and, you run evolutions. And I'm not sure if that's, we used to do that, and it's a lot of scheduling and a lot of training. And we even had special operations training where our squads and our trucks would come down for a day and cross train and train. And then we would have officer in service when we would come in, bring our officers down. And then you got your EMS in service. So, I mean, if you're in the training division, it's a huge scheduling nightmare to be able to do that. But you got to do it. That's when they ask a famous bank robber why he robbed banks, he said that's where the money is, and training, that's where the money is. If you're well trained, you're more likely to be successful than if you're poorly trained.
Like that. And then you say in your series, the Universal 3. Can you give me an overview of what that is?
Yeah. So the Universal 3 are this: when in charge, take charge. When I pin you and make you a leader, I don't make you a leader. I make you an officer. You make yourself a leader, and the organization helps raise you and make yourself a leader. When in charge, take charge. You can't acquiesce that responsibility. You're riding in the front of that engine. You're riding in the front of that truck. You're making the calls, period. Okay. Doesn't mean you're not listening and watching, and that people around you don't have great ideas, because they do. But when in charge, take charge. Number 2, people want you to take charge, but when you do so, they will resist it. Nobody comes to work to wander aimlessly and float about in a boat. They want direction. They want to know what's going on. They want a plan. They want to know, what are we doing today and how long are we going to spend on it? And, and it all gets disrupted when you get that pesky work and structure fire, that entrapment. I get it. So number 1, when in charge, take charge. Number 2, when you're in charge, people want you to be in charge, but they're going to resist it. They're going to give you some pushback. That's okay. Number 3 is, that's a natural thing. Get over it. Expect it. Expect the pushback. Learn how to be good natured about it, or learn how to say, no, we ain't doing that. This is what we're doing. Have a nice day. We'll talk about it later, but now ain't the time to talk about it.
I like that. Number 3 was?
Number 3 is, so number 1 is when you're in charge, take charge. Number 2 is people want you to take charge, but when you do so, they will resist it. And number 3 is, that's a natural thing. Get over it.
Okay. Very good. I like to ask a couple of questions as we begin to wrap up our time here. Just a few random questions for you. What was your favorite part about being a firefighter?
God, I hate to say it, because I love making hallways. I love the gunshots. I love the extrications. Everybody goes, I want to help people. No, you don't. You want adventure. You want your adrenaline up. If all you did was sit around and put Band-Aids on people all day, you'd be pissed off. But you're more jazzed when you're making it. Look, we thrive on other people's misery. That's what we exist for. We're there to go when they have their worst day. And I liked being there when they had their worst day, because that's what I trained for. That's what I wanted to do. If I'm a surgeon, I want to do surgery, and I'm an emergency medicine, I want to put chest tubes in and intubate people. Yeah, I got to do pelvics, and I got to go, oh yes, you tore your fingernail off. I get it, but that's not why I joined, So for me, the business of the business was the best part of the job. Okay. And especially the USAR stuff when we were working major collapses. It was fulfilling, it was challenging, and it made me implement all the training I had and evaluate myself and evaluate. It's like an Olympic runner, man. Nobody wants to come in second. They want to be the fastest thing on the track. The next thing, and I'll tell you what, in ancient days, heroes were made and tales were told and lives were made and things were stretched and battles were recounted around great hearths and great fires and usually accompanied with a lot of mead, you know. I'll tell you, when I went into admin, I loved being in the special operations division as admin chief. But you know what I missed? I missed sitting around the fire station and breaking bread with people because those are the hearths of today. That's where stories are told and friendships are built and legends are made. You know, so to me, sitting around the fire station eating with a bunch of firefighters is one of the most enjoyable and fulfilling things that you could ever do.
That's
And the
incredible.
schedule wasn't bad either, you know. So
Yeah. Next question is, what motivates you?
money, no. I've got to love what I do, and I've been blessed in my life. The 99.9% of the time I've ever had a job, I wanted to get up. I wanted to go to work. I loved going to work. You know, there's a meme floating around. I think I put it on Buddy the Boss. Nobody goes to their graves wishing they'd have spent more time at work, except those firefighters and those guys. They ain't right, you know. So what motivates me is loving what I do. Okay. I mean, what motivates you to go skiing or to play hockey or to play bat? You do it because you love it. And firefighters, man, we had the best job in the world, absolute best job in the world, best schedule, pillow and a blanket, gym. You know, we get to see people in their best and their worst moments, and we really get to we get adrenaline. I mean, we put ourselves in positions that can kill us or hurt us. You know, and so what motivates me is loving what I do, no matter what it is, whether it's spending time with my family or whether it's being a firefighter.
I like that. Obviously, you're a man of diverse talents. What is something you've always wanted to learn and have never gotten to?
Always wanted to get rotor wing certified. It's on my bucket list. You know, I always wanted to. I've flown in helicopters. I've crashed in helicopters. I've fallen out of helicopters. You know, I've fast roped out of helicopters. But I always wanted to learn how to fly one. Now, I've sat there and looked like I was flying, but it's not supposed to fly to begin with. So, I guess my biggest thing when I pray is I tell God I need 4 more lifetimes to do everything that I really want to do. But on the other side, He's given me more than I deserve. But yeah, rotor wing.
Cool.
I'd like to be at least fly the thing.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. What is your favorite drill that you have done with your crews? Something quick that our officers can put into practice.
You know what? Here, a couple of things. One is the rapid bailout drills. You know, the firefighter down drills. Those are awesome, and they're not used very often. But they're when you got to have them, you got to have them. The other thing is something as simple as following a hose line blacked out through the bay. You know, find the couplings. You know, is that a male coupling? Is that going into the fire, or is that female coupling? Is that going into the fire? And that was a story that was told to me by a New York City firefighter who had a crew that was bitching about having to do a basic drill like that. And then next week they got trapped in a warehouse and it was dark and they couldn't see and the heat was banking down on them. The only thing that got them out was when they were crawling was they were smart enough that they didn't get separated. But 2, they followed the couplings to the nozzle and it got them out of the building.
What was the best senior person or officer you've had, and what did they do to truly make an impact?
God, I've had a lot of them. Harry Dizell, the fire chief that I worked for, if you did something wrong, he would call you in and scold you. But the other thing he did was he had vision and he let you run. He was a talent scout, which, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had special operations or FEMA. And he sort of went, oh, Mike Brown and myself, you guys, all right, go do this, and at the end, he told me sometimes, he goes, Chase, I love you and Mike, and you guys do good things for your organization, but damn it, sometimes I feel like the guy with the broom and the scoop at the end of the circus parade with you two.
I can see that. If you could tell your younger you one thing on the first day of the job, what would you pull them aside and say?
Listen more, talk less.
I like that. And then just to close this out is you had a quote. Let me pull it up here so I can actually. You said there's a lot of things that our organizations do We are the go-to organization, the most highly valued organization in the world. But make no mistake about it. The respect did not come from the education programs, cleaning the firehouse, doing reports, and painting fire hydrants. It came when that moment of truth, we did our job completely and professionally, even at the risk of our own lives. I really appreciate that quote. Can you expand on that for us?
Well, I'm probably going to get teary-eyed here, but nobody wakes up in the morning thinking it's their last day. Nobody goes to work going, today is the last day, but it happens, doesn't it? I mean, there's 343 of our brothers, and I don't know what the numbers are up to now, but those folks, I got some great stories about 9/11 that were told to me, but a lot of those folks knew that they were dying that day, and I'm sure they were scared to death, but they didn't falter. They didn't stop doing what they were going to do because they knew these buildings are coming down. I mean, I have a specific example. I won't give it here, but a specific example of two brothers that met and talked, and they knew it was coming down, but they kept doing it, So you got to I think we get complacent. We forget what we do for a living because 95% of the time it's ho-hum, admin, HR, this dumpster fire, this car fire, this, that. But you know what? You better be prepared every single day that you go to work to be in the fight for your life and the fight for your crew's life. And you better think about it. I do a thing called combat firefighting, and I use a bunch of text, but I equate firefighting and rescue scenes to combat with, the fire or that rescue scene not being just a mindless thing. It's got resources. It's going to throw them at you. It's trying to kill you and it's trying to hurt you. But if you don't go to work every day prepared to be in the fight of your life, you're making a critical error because we lose them left and right. And nobody got up in the morning when they kissed their families goodbye and said, I'm not coming home today. Nobody says that. Nobody knows that. But it happens.
Yeah. Well, sir, I appreciate your time. I always like to leave it on this. What is something I'm new to my role and still learning every day? What are the questions that I'm not asking that I should be asking?
That's the first good question. That's a good question. Every day, how do I make a difference? When I show up, how do I leave the place that I was, no matter where it is? How do I leave it a little bit better than when I got there? How do I leave the people that I worked with a little bit better than when I got there? How do I build into them a little bit more survival capability? How do I go in and love my job every single day and do the right thing and raise the kids every single day? Alan said, you follow ugly kids home, you find ugly parents. Don't be an ugly parent. We don't want to raise ugly kids. So when you raise beautiful kids, you've done what you can do. Because I'll tell you this, at the end, there ain't going to be no statue to you in a town square, no matter how good you are, no matter what you did. And I always was disappointed with that because when I retired, I thought I did a lot of good things and I traveled all over the city and there was no statue to me. It pissed me off. But you know what I realized? If you turn around and look at all the people you interacted with, those 50, 60, 100 firefighters, guess what? There's 100 statues to you. They're right there behind you. And they're there every single day if you raised them right. And so that's the legacy that you're going to leave behind. Because I'm going to tell you what, 26 years comes quick. You don't think it will, but 26 or 30 years comes awful quick. And the next thing you know, you're going, I'm not on a rig anymore. I'm retired. Love what you're doing. Spend your time appropriately. Raise the kids. And in the end, you want to know how much you're going to be missed, put your hand in a bucket of water and pull it out. The hole that's left is just how much you'll be missed. That organization's been going on for hundreds of years before you got there, going 100 years after you. So do the best you can with the time you got. Raise the kids. Love what you do. Love yourself and have a great time because there's no better job in the world.
Awesome, sir. Well, I appreciate it so much. And, hopefully we can do this again and talk sometime because it was really interesting.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I rambled a little bit, but you know how I am, man. You get me on a roll and I'm done.
That's fun. Any day.
Okay. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys at FDIC. We're only doing an hour and a half, but we're gonna rock it.
What are the dates this year so we can get those out?
I think I'm there to 28. I think
Very
I'm
good.
28. It's on a schedule.
Very good.
Got an hour to do a 3-day program.
See what you can do.
All right, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.